So thanks for coming. As Kat said, we're going to try and make this as interactive as possible. So it's quite nice that there's only a few people in the room because perhaps we can address and talk about some of your issues here and help you out and facilitate some discussions. So, you know, over the past few days, you've probably heard some amazing stuff, hopefully thought of some amazing ideas, maybe even come together with some potential collaborators, thinking about a new business venture, a new startup, a new invention, whatever it is. Common thing everyone goes through is, you know, these questions: when's the right time to start up a company? Investment, how much is too much? As a founder, am I getting looked after? What the hell is a convertible note? What's a good amount of equity to give away? What do I do about data? How do I protect myself? Do I need a privacy policy? Can I just copy another platform's terms and conditions? Is that fine? What about my co-founder? What the hell? Excuse language. What's the shareholders' agreement? Patent, trademark. These are all common questions you hear all the time. And what we often see with founders is there's so many things to ask, so many things to do. It often gets put in the too hard basket. I'm not sure if you guys saw the Startup Muster report yesterday that was sort of launched here, but it was reiterated in that report. This was a report into the status of startups in Australia, and what was really, really interesting was that 54% of startup founders said that the most important thing they outsource is legal advice. 17% of them wish they had a legal co-founder as part of the initial founding team. And the one I found most interesting was that 32% of them said they benefited more from legal help than they did media exposure. So that's really, really interesting. So obviously it's an area a lot of people need. Often people find it intimidating. So what we're going to do today is try to draw that back a little bit, break it down a little, and show you how you guys as founders and people interested in working with startups can access relevant startup advice, if you like. And so, by way of introduction, my name's Renan Heine. I'm the founder and head of legal at a company called #Corporate Advice, and we exist for one very reason: to help entrepreneurs make their ideas happen by providing them with relevant, relatable, and startup specialised legal accounting and strategy services. We've got amazing panellists here, so I'll be leading the conversation. We've got amazing panels here, 2 entrepreneurs and a startup lawyer, startup professional, if you like. But before I even intro them, I thought instead of doing questions at the end, I'd love to hear from the crowd if we're going to just have a conversation here. I've got a whole bunch of questions. I'd much prefer to actually ask the panelists your questions. So anyone have anything at all that they're interested in? Small, big, we'll try cover it.
Hello.
Just fire it out. What area?
Hi guys, really interesting topic. I started my own business 14 months ago called Born Digital, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I was in corporate for 21 years before that. And so anyone who wants to jump. It is like jumping off a cliff. But
yeah, a couple of corporate refugees here as well.
Sorry?
A couple of corporate refugees here as well.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, good. It'd be good to catch up later. Look, the key thing I want to ask is, how do we help each other out more? Because the more we help each other out as entrepreneurs, the more we can all grow. And just thinking of what are some of the ideas where we can all work together? Are there some forums where we can work together better to help each other out?
Well, maybe I'll take note of it and then we'll work it in. Okay, so collaboration, how startups can come together, partner together a bit more. Anything else? Write it down.
Hi. So my question is about the approach. I know there are 2 schools of thought. One is keep it lean and don't do all the paperwork before you found your product market fit and all that. And the second one is, well, you need to start set it all up well from the beginning, because if not, then stuff is going to bite you. So these are 2 opposing approaches. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts on.
Yep. So how to keep it lean but keep it legal?
Maybe.
I'll try work it in. maybe one more, and then we'll get rolling into the conversation.
David, do you have a question? Tell us what it is.
So we were just, if you had a question on anything you want Andrew to answer here today. Anything. Legal related, preferably. All right, let's get into it. All right, so to my right, we've got three amazing people. We've got Cherie Rubenstein, founder, former corporate lawyer at Allens, corporate refugee, now founder of One Roof co-working space, a co-working space doing amazing things supporting female entrepreneurs. So it's a female-focused co-working space, but it's much more than a space. Place for events, collaboration, an amazing place for female entrepreneurs to get together, skill up and support each other. As of today, also just launched an accelerator program focused on female entrepreneurs. Today was day one, so we're really lucky to have Cherie here. We got Andrew Ranger over here, Pause advisory member, perennial entrepreneur, founded a number of startups. Right now, I'll let him explain what he actually does, but he's a CEO of a startup that's getting quite a lot of traction at the moment. It's called Sky Memorials. And he has been working hand in hand with Jeremy here, who is a corporate lawyer. What's really impressive is his entry into the startup game was with a small little company called Seek way back when. So he's been working with startups for since 1998. A lot of expertise jumping between the investor side and the startup side as well. So I will try work in those questions, but maybe some specific stuff for you guys to get things going. Andrew, you look desperate to talk, so you're a perennial entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about your current startup and how you found working with Jeremy, who's your lawyer, and some tips on that front.
Sure. So I run a startup called Sky Memorials, which is a digital obituaries and memorials website. I hope you never have to use it. And apart from that, we've been working with Jeremy. So Jeremy Goldman is at Klager Partners, and we chose Jeremy because we needed a lawyer for the company that would represent all the shareholders and all the directors and advise all of us equally about what our rights are. Now, I was very new. I'm not new to the startup game, but I'm new to like this level of startup that I got involved in. And so when we sort of sat down and we said, hey, we need a lawyer to advise every single person in the company, that every single person that's putting money in, who do we get? And we chose Jeremy not only because he was very well recommended, but because he had the experience with Seek, and the work we were doing with was very similar to what Seek was. It was essentially an obituary section that is a two-sided marketplace. And so Jeremy sat down with us and we all had these big ideas about, it's going to be the next Facebook. We need to protect for the IPO. We need to sort of look at doing the legal work in advance for like a future problem. And Jeremy was really good at sitting us all down and saying, guys, do the documents you need for the business you have today. And in the future, you can update those documents as you evolve and as you get bigger. But don't try and over-engineer the problem in the early stages, because whatever shareholders agreement you have done today is not going to be the shareholders agreement you need when you actually take on outside investment in the future.
Absolutely. So that kind of goes to the question on how do you keep it lean, but how do you stick with the law? It's really focusing in on what's in front of you. What does your product look right now? What does your MVP look like? How much do you need to protect there? And so let's just jump to Jeremy now. You're known as a corporate lawyer. So Jeremy has this unique ability where he's working with really big corporates, but then early stage startups as well. So I'm really interested to hear what it means to provide startup advice, if you like, and I guess how your approach in dealing with startups differs compared to, the corporate world.
It's a good question. So is this on? It's a tricky question that you've asked, Ron, and it's, the major difference between a startup, obviously, and a large corporate is budget. you've just as a startup you've just got no money, and you've just got to beg, borrow, and steal, and every cent counts. Whereas when you're dealing with large corporates, they often have a management team, often will have in-house counsel, and they've got many stakeholders that they need to address. So they're looking for all the bells and whistles. They often need letters of advice, supporting positions that they can present to people further up the line. Whereas when you're dealing with a startup, you're generally dealing directly with the founders. So the way I tend to operate is that I don't kill the calf before it becomes the cow. So I look at my startup client as someone that will become, the next Seek, or the next Car Sales, or the next Catch of the Day, or the next Sky Memorials, and try and sort of nurse them through that early period. And that can be anything from sort of addressing queries in the car on the way into the office, when I'm not sitting at my desk, and I can sort of charge my time at a lower hourly rate. I can sit down with them and sort of work out what the founder's appetite for risk is. I mean, the very fact that they're a founder of a business means they've got coconuts that I don't have, and they're prepared to adopt, quite a serious level of risk. But at the same time, you need to understand what the level of risk is, because the advice that I may give to a corporate may be more conservative because they've got much more at stake, whereas someone that's a startup is really sort of flying out there on the edge, and the advice that I may give may be a little bit more sort of cutting edge, and it wouldn't be the same advice that I would give to a larger corporate.
Yeah.
The corporates pay the bills, and the startups provide the fun and the entertainment.
All right. So what about you, Cherie? So you run a successful growing startup yourself, but you're in the unique position where you have a lot of members at your co-working space. You provide them with support. So how has good advice, if you could give some tips to the crowd, how has good advice really helped you, and how does it help your members, to grow their businesses or help them out with their ideas to get the comfort that they're doing the right thing, or acting legal, if you like?
Yeah. So I would say, firstly, I've found for myself and for the members at One Roof, finding advisors who really understand what it is to run a startup. They understand the nuances of a startup is really important. I have a co-founder in the US who engaged a lawyer who really wasn't really geared towards startup lawyers to startups, and that's, it was quite challenging, and we spent more money than we needed to there. So I think, we've really found that we engage with hashtag corporate advice, and they've been great for us and for our members. The key things that I find we look for in terms of legal advice and our members is things like, setting up the legal entity, so incorporating the shareholders agreement, so thinking about, with yourself and your co-founder, the details of that. Hashtag was really instrumental in terms of the negotiation process, so not just setting up for me, for One Roof, not just setting up the document, drafting the documents, but also actually helping with the negotiation of that. And then agreements with, kind of standard contractual agreements with customers and clients, thinking about IP, intellectual property, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And there really is, there was a question about, that, how much do you kind of go lean, and then how much do you spend on the legal? And it's a really fine balance, I find. And, I am an ex-lawyer, and even I have definitely made mistakes. But initially, when I started One Roof, I was just testing the idea. We didn't put any money into legal. We just kind of went for it. We were testing. We kind of had, really rough memorandums of understanding in place, even if that. And so, it's that dance between investing money and thought before things go wrong. Yeah,
I think it's really important. Maybe just touching out, let's go into that, because that was one of the questions, the how to keep it lean, when to pay for advice. Jeremy, do you have any comments there or thoughts? What do you do when an entrepreneur comes, you love their idea, but, they have very little, they have no revenue, they're pre-revenue, if you like. How do you go about helping them out, advising them?
If
what are some tips?
If there's one area that I find that founders constantly sort of get themselves stuck with and fall foul off is IP, intellectual property. Time and again, I see, I meet with and speak to founders of businesses that have worked with mates, friends, possibly people overseas, and they tell me that they've either paid for something and or they've agreed to take something in consideration for some services that they may provide somebody else, believing that that in and of itself entitles them to own the underlying IP ownership rights in what they've received, and that's not the case. Just very, very simply, the position at law in Australia and in most jurisdictions is really that the creator of the work is the owner of the work. So simply by paying for something, you don't own it. You'll have the right to use it, but using something and actually owning it outright are two very, very different things. And the only way to transfer ownership to intellectual property rights validly is in writing and actually signed. So an email in and of itself to saying that I'm going to give you X or Y or Z or source code or whatever it happens to be, or some mock-up photos is insufficient to transfer title to the intellectual property rights in that work. And so many disputes arise by failing to actually lock down your ownership to IP. And if there was a second issue, it would be around branding. A lot of people think that just by registering a domain name, registering a business name and or a company name gives them the monopoly right, either Australia-wide or possibly worldwide, to using, to the exclusion of everyone else, that particular brand or slogan or logo, whatever it happens to be. And again, the only way to ensure that you've got the exclusive monopoly right to a brand, a logo, a tagline is via trademark registration. It's just as simple as that.
Just on that, because we did that. You pulled us up on this when we were doing a lot of work with developers and designers, and you said we need to get a transfer of IP ownership form signed. And we did in most cases, but even I, knowing the law, even I have, like, there's definitely IP that's still owned by some supplier out there that I'm not really going to chase up. And I have friends that are going through the courts, like attacking each other because they didn't sign those IP rights away, and it does end in disaster, absolute disaster.
The only exception to that sort of broad general rule is that if you have a company and you are fortunate enough to actually be able to afford employees, the default position is that any work that your employees create for you in the furtherance of their service as an employee is actually owned by the company. Absent that, unless you get a formal assignment signed in writing, you do not own it.
The only one you also said that was when we had, if they owned shares in the company, that it would still, is that okay? Because like our developers own shares in the company and we didn't get a IP form signed by them, but they're theoretically, yeah. You want to give some legal advice right now? That's why I'm here.
Owning shares in a company in and of itself is insufficient to transfer IP ownership rights to work that they may create for the company. You actually need to formally assign the IP specifically in writing and have it signed. Now, if the provisions in the shareholders agreement that may say that any work that a shareholder does in connection with the business is automatically owned by the company, then that would be sufficient. But absent that, we may have to address that.
We'll have a chat after.
It sounds like you need to take this offline. Let's go into, I think, on the collaboration point, because this is another question we find I get asked all the time. Sheree, I'm sure you probably encounter the same thing. Early stage entrepreneur comes to you, I've got this idea. Do I need an NDA to talk about it? So what do you guys think in your experiences building your business? What did you do? You had an idea, you want to collaborate. How can we better promote collaboration between people and do it in a way that everyone shares and everyone wins? And what's your approach to just NDAs in general?
I created an NDA app a few years ago called Privy, and I realized that I hate NDAs, and I think they're stupid. And if you put an NDA in front of me, I won't sign it. And I know a lot of people are in the exact same boat now. because they might be working on the exact same thing at the exact same time, and it would create a huge amount of problems for them.
So that's NDAs are anti-collaboration.
The lawyer's freaking out.
Yeah.
That's right. And I'm kind of a similar camp. I feel like, it's just an idea. That's it. Everybody's got ideas, and a lot of the time people have had the idea that you've had, and it is all in the execution. And if you're not really out there, in a really kind of lean startup way, testing that idea and putting it out to the world and getting constant feedback, then it's very difficult to grow. And if you're constantly asking people to sign NDAs, or if they're not willing to sign them, then it can really hold you back. I think potentially I've kind of seen with my co-founder as we were going through that investment process and thinking about getting, capital raising, we started getting potential investors to sign NDAs. So there are situations, but I think definitely when you're at the early stages and you have an idea, I meet so many people who think, their idea is the best idea and they don't want to share it with anyone, but it's just an idea. And I encourage people to get it out there and test it, because that idea will probably evolve into something else.
Jeremy?
I've got mixed feelings about this topic, I've got to tell you. The one area that I'd say it would be critical to actually have an NDA in place would be if your idea is actually capable of being protected under the Patent Act. Because if you make a public disclosure, and there are very, very few exceptions which are not likely to apply to you, absent a non-disclosure agreement to an unrelated third party, you may actually preclude yourself from actually being able to secure patent protection for the idea at a later stage. So if you've made a disclosure, the Patent Act provides if you've made a disclosure under an obligation of confidence, and clearly an NDA would be objective evidence of that, then you won't be precluded from seeking patent protection at a later stage. If, however, your idea is not capable of patent protection, then I'll be honest, I don't have a fixed view. There are some VCs that I've worked with that refuse to sign NDAs. I know a founder of a top 50 ASX listed company that flew to Sydney to meet with Roger Allen, who's like the grandfather of venture capital in this country, and the director of Allen and Buckridge. My mate, who's the founder of this iconic Australian tech company, produced an NDA and said he wanted him to sign it, and before the meeting started, Roger refused to sign. My mate got up and walked out and flew back to Melbourne. That was the shortest meeting he ever attended. Now, the company at that stage could ill afford, the $500 to $600 flight from Melbourne to Sydney, but he just wanted to make a point to Roger. Roger ended up investing, and the company did very nicely out of it. But there's two schools of thought. I really don't have a firm view, but my caveat would be that if you can seek patent protection, insist upon it. From a perception perspective, if you've got an NDA and you're insisting that someone sign it, you do create the perception in the mind of the recipient that you do have something that may actually be worth protecting, and it shows and it also shows possibly a level of sophistication and astuteness that you sort of thought about this, and you're smart enough not to sort of be talking about this to every Tom, Dick and Harry that you happen to meet. Equally, some people may form the view that you're showing a level of naivety, that what you've thought of is unique, and that no one in the world has ever thought of this before, and that no, you're actually not the rocket scientist that you think you are. So I think you just need to sort of use your own gut feeling as to what's appropriate.
So we've got a couple more minutes. Any questions, anything specific that anyone here wants to ask any of us? Oh, we've got two. Hopefully they're similar. No?
I run a small social enterprise and I've kind of ignored my legal side of things. But I am very interested at this stage that it's starting to work to look at it in more detail. A few years ago, I was in the product design kind of area and there were these great resources that the Victorian government kind of put out for IP for product designers. Is there anything that you guys know of that is kind of a similar kind of thing for startups, for like what things you should be covering and getting assistance in first?
Do you guys... so there's lots of great resources out there, and a lot of it is it's quite daunting and complicated if you go searching and you start trying to read blogs and is this right, is this not right? A really great resource is actually the Startup Victoria office hours. So I don't know if all of you have seen it, but Startup Victoria basically put up, got a whole bunch of experts in all sorts of areas. There are a number of lawyers up there, differing expertise, social enterprise, startup, technology. So I think it's about actually, utilising something like that, a platform like that, and having a half-hour conversation, because you don't need to know all the answers, but if you can have an advisor who can point you or highlight what might be an important... Okay, so 3 things. From my perspective, something we haven't really touched on, but I think your startup in a general sense, if you don't work out what's happening in-house, your relationship with your co-founder as a starting point, you're not going to go anywhere. If we all agree ideas are nice and execution is everything and you're working on this with a co-founder, I guess as a starting point, what does your structure look like and what does your relationship look like from the start with that person is probably just an overarching, really important thing for me. Jeremy, I don't know if you have any other comments on that.
I mean, one thing that we sort of was touched on very sort of early in the piece is that when you're talking about a company, there are 3 hats that people wear in a company, and sometimes people wear all 3, and they are as an employee, as a shareholder, and as a director. And each of those roles or hats have very, very different rights, and they also have very, very different responsibilities. And I think it's really important that early on people try and delineate what it is that they want in respect of each of those roles, and they need to sort of agree on that with their with their co-founders. I'm sort of reluctant to sort of hog the panel.
I think I'm getting the eyes here, and it's time for everyone else to join in the beer drinking. I'm gonna hang around. Jeremy, Cherie, and Andrew will probably be around for a little bit as well. If you have any questions, we're here, and enjoy.